On July 29, 2008, a young mother named Susan Cox Powell recorded a video listing the assets she owned, just in case something bad were to happen to her. On the morning of December 7, 2009, more than a year after that video was recorded, Susan vanished without a trace. Susan was born on October 16, 1981, to Chuck and Judy Cox in Washington State. She was one of 4 sisters in a devout LDS Mormon family. Susan was known for being cheerful, open, and always caring for others. In November 2000, Susan met Josh Powell at a party. They quickly fell in love and married just 5 months later. Susan grew up in a loving family, while Josh came from a very different background. His parents had divorced because his father, Stephen Powell, was domineering, misogynistic, and held strange beliefs about polygamy and deviant religious ideas. He was even accused of practicing occult rituals. Josh and his younger brother grew up in an environment of violence and dysfunction. From a young age, Josh exhibited behavioral issues, including animal cruelty and serious problems with emotional regulation. Perhaps due to their rushed marriage, Susan was unaware of the dark past Josh and his family carried with them. With her kind-hearted nature, Susan always focused on the positive side of others, ignoring warning signs about Josh. After they married, Susan moved in with Josh's father, Stephen Powell, however. It didn't take long for her to realize that he was a true creep. Stephen frequently stole Susan's underwear, watched her with an obvious lustful gaze, and always carried around a camera, pretending to film family activities, but secretly recording Susan. He had taken hundreds of photos of her without permission, even installing hidden cameras in the bathroom to spy on her. Stephen also recorded himself sniffing Susan's underwear. He was not shy about confessing his twisted feelings to his daughter-in-law. He even kept a journal detailing his perverse fantasies. One entry read, "I know some people will think I'm weird or perverted for collecting Susan's personal hygiene items, but does this make sense? I just went to Susan's drawer and sniffed a clump of hair I took from her comb." When Susan discovered all this, she was horrified. She begged Josh to move out, saying she couldn't endure living with Stephen any longer. At first, Josh didn't believe her and thought she was imagining things, but things kept escalating. One time when Susan was sick and unconscious, Stephen took advantage of the situation, pretending to care for her in order to have secret physical contact. Eventually, Susan was adamant about moving out. Josh agreed, and they relocated to West Valley City, Utah. At first, it seemed like a fresh start for their little family. After settling in, they welcomed their first son, Charlie Powell, in 2005, followed by their second son, Braden Powell, in 2007. Susan worked at Wells Fargo while Josh was a computer technician. However, their marriage began to unravel over time. Josh became increasingly controlling and domineering, demanding absolute submission from his wife. Much like his father, Josh started to adopt strange beliefs about witchcraft and the occult, showing signs of being obsessed with power. The arguments between Susan and Josh grew more frequent and prolonged. What started as shouting matches turned into slaps and eventually physical confrontations. Susan filed for divorce. But as anyone who has been in a toxic relationship knows, leaving a toxic partner is never an easy task. On Monday morning, December 7th, the preschool teachers tried to reach Susan and Josh when their children, Charlie and Braden, didn't show up for class, but neither of them responded. The teachers then called the emergency contact numbers listed in the files Josh's mother and sister, but neither knew where the couple had gone. This was highly unusual. Finally, Josh's mother decided to call the police, asking them to check on the family and ensure that Susan and Josh were okay. When the police arrived and knocked on the door, no one answered. They found that Susan hadn't gone to work that day, nor had she called in sick, which was completely out of character for her. The police obtained a warrant, broke a window to gain entry, and found the house filled with loud music. But no one was home. Everything seemed untouched. with no signs of forced entry, however. There was one detail that caught their attention: a wet stain on the carpet, with 2 fans placed on either side, seemingly trying to dry the area. They also found another wet patch on the couch. Susan's purse and all her identification documents were found inside the house. While the police were still trying to piece things together, the sound of a car pulling into the garage was heard. It was Josh Powell, along with the 2 boys. Josh appeared confused and unaware of what was happening. He claimed that he and the kids had gone camping overnight, while Susan stayed home because she was feeling unwell and had to work the following morning. Josh said he had no idea what had happened to her after Susan's disappearance. Josh immediately became the prime suspect. He was summoned to the police station for questioning. There, Josh repeated his story. The last time he saw Susan was early Sunday morning, before driving the kids out for the camping trip. Josh said it was a normal Sunday. In the morning, Susan took the kids to church. But by afternoon, she wasn't feeling well. Around midnight, Josh decided to take the children camping while Susan was sleeping. According to him, everything was perfectly normal. However, Josh's statements quickly raised suspicions when the police asked why he would go camping in the early hours of Monday, especially when he was supposed to be at work and the kids needed to go to school. Josh replied that he thought it was Sunday. This contradicted his previous statement that Susan had taken the children to church that morning, a Sunday activity, which he surely should have known. Furthermore, no parent would take 2 young children camping in the middle of the night, especially when a heavy snowstorm was occurring in the area that evening. When asked specifically about the details of that day, Josh gave a vague answer. He claimed not to remember exactly where he had gone, only mentioning that they had gone to a nearby campsite called Simpson Springs, a desolate, remote area in Utah's desert. This vague response only increased the police's suspicions. Clearly, Josh seemed unconcerned about Susan and showed no signs of wanting to find his wife. Meanwhile, another investigator was attempting to speak with Charlie, their 4-year-old son. Charlie unexpectedly said, "Mom went camping with us, but Mom stayed at the park and didn't come back." "Where?" "Stay, the park." "Where? You know where, at the park?" "No, my mom." As time passed, Charlie became more distracted and began talking about imaginary stories, like how they had gone to the campsite by airplane. Eventually, the detectives were unable to gather any more useful information from Charlie. Moreover, they understood that the testimony of a 4-year-old child should be carefully considered. The police were forced to look for another line of investigation. They checked Josh's truck. Upon examination, they discovered alarming evidence: a metal crowbar, chainsaw, shovel, tarp, several gas cans, a pair of gloves, and a bag full of camping gear. However, most of these items appeared unused. The police also found Susan's Motorola phone, but the SIM card had been removed and was missing. When they searched the house, they noticed various electrical tools. Forensic analysis revealed that the wet spot on the carpet, where the 2 fans were directed, contained traces of blood. The blood sample was confirmed to be Susan's. Additionally, they discovered that Susan had several life insurance policies worth over $1 million. Just 10 days after Susan disappeared, Josh applied to withdraw all of her retirement funds, instead of making any efforts to search for his wife. The police later found that Susan had a safe deposit box at her workplace. Inside, they found a Kone journal and a handwritten note. It was her final will. The will was addressed to Susan's family and friends, except for Josh Powell. She wrote, "I do not trust him." On Saturday, June 28, 2008, in this letter, Susan revealed that her marriage had been problematic for many years and that she did not trust Josh. She wrote that if she were to die suddenly, it would not be an accident, even if it appeared that way. The safe also contained some savings, bonds, and legal documents in case Susan needed to flee with the children from Josh. She had confided in a co-worker that Josh often threatened her if she dared to file for divorce. He would end her life, and she would never see her children again. Even though Susan was the primary breadwinner in the family, Josh constantly pressured her to save every penny and keep track of every expenditure for him to check. Ironically, it was Josh who had financial issues and was irresponsible with spending. He constantly changed jobs, never holding on to one for long, and filed for bankruptcy in 2007, with debts exceeding $200,000. A witness once said, "Josh bought so many things, then went bankrupt, and then started buying again, even on my credit card. Jewelry, DVDs, cheap trinkets. They were piled up all over the house." The police also visited the campsite that Josh claimed to have taken the kids to the night Susan disappeared, Simpson Springs. However, the area was covered in snow, and they found no evidence to suggest Josh had actually been there. The snowstorm that night made verification difficult. There were no tire tracks, no campfires, no signs of any items being used. They weren't even sure if Josh had really gone there. Josh was clearly the prime suspect, but the police didn't have strong enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant. Josh quickly hired a lawyer and refused to cooperate with the police entirely. Josh's brother, Michael Powell, also became a person of interest. Around the time Susan disappeared, Michael had left his car at a scrapyard in another state. The police tracked down the car and had a K9 unit inspect it. The dog detected the scent of decaying human remains inside the car. However, forensic results were not strong enough to draw a definite conclusion. This lead became a dead end, as not long after, Michael tragically took his own life by jumping from a tall building. The police continued to seek a search warrant for Stephen Powell's house, Susan's father-in-law. What they found inside the house horrified the entire investigation team. Cotton balls Susan had used to wipe nail polish, her underwear carefully placed in Ziploc bags, and other personal hygiene items stored like treasures. They also discovered small bags containing toenail clippings and hair, each labeled with a date and Susan's name. In addition, the police found dozens of hidden camera videos featuring different women, including 2 young neighbor girls, aged 8 and 10. None of the victims were aware they had been secretly filmed. Although Stephen Powell was never arrested in connection with Susan's disappearance, he was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison for possessing child pornography. Stephen was released in July 2017 and died of a heart attack in 2018. While the investigation was ongoing, Charlie and Braden were placed in the custody of their maternal grandparents, Chuck and Judy Cox. However, Josh resented losing custody and held a deep grudge. On February 5, 2012, more than 2 years after Susan's disappearance, a social worker brought the boys to Josh's house in Graham, Washington for a supervised visit. But as soon as Charlie and Braden stepped inside, Josh immediately slammed the door, locked it, and trapped the worker outside. The social worker immediately called the police. However, by the time the authorities arrived, it was too late. The house was engulfed in flames after a massive explosion that shook the entire neighborhood. Debris from the blast scattered everywhere. When the firefighters were able to control the flames, they discovered 3 bodies inside, Josh and his 2 young sons. The police found 2 large gas cans in the house and concluded that Josh had planned a murder-suicide all along. Just minutes before the fire broke out, Josh had called family members to say his goodbyes. The cause of Josh's death was determined to be asphyxiation from gas, while the police believe he used an axe to kill Charlie and Braden before setting the fire and taking his own life. After the tragedy, Susan's parents filed a lawsuit against the state of Washington, accusing the authorities of gross negligence in protecting the children from a father with a high risk of harm. The court ruled in their favor, and the Cox family was awarded $100 million in compensation. Susan's family used most of this money to support charities dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and to co-violence and took most of this money to support charities dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence, and the Susan's family used most of violence and decidedness money to support charities dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence, advocate for reforms in the child welfare system to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. To this day, the remains of Susan Cox Powell have never been found. Tragically, they may never be.